really well until recently when, if you guys are following my YouTube channel, you saw it today, we put a video called Video Evidence Probation Officer Bertley perjured himself to send me back to jail. And my probation officer in California actually put out some inaccurate reports that I was just so fortunate enough to have video evidence that clarified a little more precisely what I think he was trying to communicate. But the result is now I'm wearing an ankle bracelet of government jewelry. Maybe I'll go back and forth like for the next 2 hours and really confuse the GPS monitor. Make a nice little pattern for them to follow on the map. But it's funny because the only restriction I have is that I'm not allowed in DC. So we've had a lot of fun on this tour, and in an interview recently, someone asked me, "Who's the coolest famous person you've met?" And for those of you who don't know my story, going back after I got out of the Marines and was active with IBW, I had a radio show for a while and a TV show briefly, and I've been doing independent media online for a few years. So I've gotten to be like a lot of really amazing people. But the problem with that question is that most people in America who are famous for kind of bullshit reasons. And I don't even want to answer that question because to me, well, probably the most famous person I've met, I won't even say his name, he said that the coolest thing about being famous was getting to hang out with other famous people. And she lives in LA, so I know that's really not saying much. But I get to hang out with people who are a part of this movement. People who are waking up, people who care about freedom, people like all of you, and I find that way more satisfying than the kind of people that I get to interview, or that hey, I don't care if you have a reason for me to interview you or not. If you're someone who's really engaged and cares about what's going on, we're gonna have a way better time than if you just happen to be famous for no good reason. So one of the coolest things that we've got to do traveling around the country is ask all of the different communities that we come into contact with, and that's really what we have everywhere we go around the message of freedom. And what I've been asking is, how do people live differently as a result of an awareness of the message of freedom? So if you know all the answers, Macy, don't yell them out. But what do you see here, maybe in Virginia or in the community here in the Richmond area? What do people do differently as a result of this awareness?
Wait, a lot of better fights, man.
Get arrested a lot.
Get arrested a lot, well.
Illegally.
Yeah.
I know it's really unfortunate that Nathan Cox couldn't be here tonight. For those of you who don't know, Nathan Cox is an infamous local activist. He certainly should, and he gets arrested probably more than his fair share.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's really, let me contextualize this a little bit. How many of you know, viscerally, just from having been around long enough and seeing how people wake up, that we are on the right side of history? Yeah? Pretty cool feeling, right? People don't, you know what I mean by how people wake up? Nobody goes, yeah, freedom, liberty, respecting individual rights, not pointing guns at each other to control people and organize society. What an amazing idea. And then just wakes up the next morning, screw it, let's just point guns at people I don't like. You know what I mean? It's a one-way street of awareness. And as much as we see an intellectual or philosophical convergence, there's a much deeper trend, isn't there? And it's like a cultural shift, a human actualization movement that is happening along with this. And it's manifest particularly strongly, unsurprisingly, in the culture of people who see that a voluntary society is not just inevitable, but something that we should be working towards actively. So, daily lives. I hope that getting arrested is not something you have to deal with on a daily basis here as libertarians in Richmond. Statism isn't that thick here, is it? Okay.
It's all these state here, mate. Yes. Unfortunately, yes.
Well, actually, it's really good to hear that marijuana was just legalized in Virginia. You're not allowed, right? You're just not allowed to carry more than you can put in your mouth at one time. Okay, so what do you see people doing differently in their daily lives? Question authority, absolutely. So it's not getting arrested, I would hope, but when you have encounters with police, as one example of authority, you engage differently when it's messages from government in some form or for any other authority in your life. Just the attitude of thinking for yourself changes that relationship, right? Okay, what else?
Okay, about years ago, talking about cop-line activism and stuff, people just were eager to jump on you and say, you just hate cops. Now it seems every other week there's a story where people that before were hating on me for that are now that kind of on the same paper.
Okay, no, it's a great shift of coming out. Still looking for like daily practices.
Where people get their news from.
Absolutely. Be a conscientious consumer of information in every form, especially news. It changes that in a very honest way. But really all information, right? And again, because
Personal notification of unjust laws.
you don't take it as authority, right? Absolutely. But that's sort of like a broad thing. But good point. That's a way of describing a lot of the stuff we're talking about in terms of the civil disobedience stuff. But what else?
You become a lot more respectful of other people's property. Like you're much more aware of their boundaries and things like that.
Embracing self-ownership, embracing the non-aggression principle means at a fundamental level you kind of relate to people differently. At least if you were a real asshole before you got that idea.
Becoming more self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient in what form?
Growing your own food.
Yes.
Your own thinking for yourself.
Well, growing your own food. Let's talk about that for a second. That one's really huge too, and it's kind of nice how it relates to all these other things, right? Well, the FDA said it was okay to eat, so I'm going to eat it. Right? You don't do that anymore. I learned how to do backyard chickens from Nathan Cox here, actually. On that count, though, there's a whole host of things that go along with that. Like, why do you grow your own food?
Because you don't trust, what the government tells you to be, organic or whatever kind of.
Because in a way, you care more when you care about life and freedom, or you care about...
It's a fundamental representation of caring about your own way of life. Being able to survive as a country, you have to be able to survive individually.
You care about your health.
Yeah.
You just want to eat healthy, right? Like, you just don't want to know, like, my food is organic, it comes from my own source, like, right? But what other what else does that motivate then? What other activity does caring about your health and not trusting authority manifest in?
Financial prosperity.
Financial, okay, so that's kind of a different category, but how do people conduct their financial life differently as a result of this awareness?
So you're more self-aware of your accountability of your inactions. When you mess up, you don't immediately come and look for government help. It's like, I messed up, I need to write this myself.
Are you talking about activism?
Hold on, I think we need to do a little housekeeping before we go any further on this. If you're a cop, please raise your hand. Okay, well, we never found anybody like that.
Actually, all of us should. We have to be responsible for other communities.
Well, if you are afraid that I'll remember, you will not be held accountable for anything you say here tonight. We do not take names or check IDs on the way in. So financially, connected with agorism, there's one other big one that people are kind of afraid to say. Although financially, maybe we will go to one of the manifestations of this is alternative currencies, right? Or alternative savings, if you will, in gold, silver, Bitcoin. I think those are the big three that are the factors. But thinking of all the ways that you think differently in terms of material value, like real attainable value, when you start thinking along those lines, right? Okay, but why? What are the reasons you would use Bitcoin?
You just don't trust central banking.
What's the difference?
What do you do with gold and silver? Silver in particular. Trade, barter, right? Why would you barter?
Because you actually have something tangible as opposed to a promise.
I guess really got to break. So barter, like.
It's tired. It's not bad.
there's a lot of forms, legal and illegal, right? And they're almost all illegal in equity, which is really kind of sad. The only like legal way to not pay taxes is to be broke and never have any money. I guess you guys understand that one. Because even like with barter, technically any exchange of value over $20 is supposed to be reported to the IRS in your taxes. So like it's legal and it's unenforceable, right? But you're still breaking the law. This is why there's a book now called 3 Felonies a Day, because that's how many the average American commits. And most of them are, petty financial crimes that are all technically felonies.
Do you think that they plan on when they enforce those laws more strictly than the IRS?
No. There might be flips. We're going to talk about the future of freedom, which is chapter 10, by the way. We'll get into like where all these things are going in that sense. So remind me if I don't come back to it. But a lot of these ways aren't really illegal in terms of actual tax evasion. But like, working under the table, working for cash, right? Rearranging your life to minimize your actual legal tax liability. And for some people that's, I'd rather be poor. I'd rather limit myself to what I can do in cash than be working for the man in some form. Like, if I get, not only do I have a lot less risk of ever being audited and like going through that, but I get the satisfaction of living, more in line with my values, right? For some people this is doing more of their business through an LLC or some other corporate form or a nonprofit like the Freedom Fund. All of those different things, right? So tax evasion, that's a big one. There's one category here that we haven't touched on at all, though. Not even close.
Can I speak to something you just mentioned?
Sure.
I happen to be an accountant, and working with a lot of libertarian entrepreneurs, one of the things you might learn is working for yourself, you probably don't have to earn as much money as if you're an employee working for somebody else, because you don't get taxed to death as much. You to some extent, you control how much you get taxed, and we're not talking about anything that would resemble tax evasion or anything like that. But you can maintain a very healthy lifestyle working for yourself, that if you're working as a W-2 employee, you'd have to earn much more income.
To overcome the inefficiency.
That ties up to
Would you like to make yourself available to anybody here if they want advice on how to rearrange their life?
If they were to going through 1099, do you?
Well, let me say, when we have an accountant saying what he's seen in the movement is positive things with people doing organizing their money. Do you want to make yourself available for people after they can? Sure, of course. Okay. What's your name?
James.
James. Everybody, James. The libertarian accountant. We should have more of those. Is that James? Libertarian
Most people, a lot of the libertarian community doesn't necessarily want to work a 9-to-5 job. To some extent, we don't necessarily want to answer to anybody.
And that's a lawyer. So that's actually a really good answer to the bigger question here as well of people living differently. We see a lot of entrepreneurship. And it's not just like, well, I'm going to start the next Fortune 500 company. It's, no, I'm going to conduct my business in a way that's satisfying to me for how I, with my skills, provide value to the market. And then we account for it in our own special ways. Okay, but there's one area we totally missed.
Personal relationships with other people.
Well, we kind of touched on that, and that's really important. And we're going to come back to that later as well. There's actually like 2 big areas that we really haven't touched on, and one of them is pretty can be controversial. One of them is the other one that people are afraid to mention in public. But war? Well, not enlisting. That's but that's not what I'm talking about. Let's go. Yes.
I didn't do it. Actually, it's drugs. Drugs?
Drugs. Okay, thank you. Well, we'll come back to that in a second. But there's still one other area we haven't touched on at all. Because that's kind of helpful. But because you can grow your own.
I feel like I need to study.
Okay, now that's good. We haven't firearms, ownership, and it's not, at least, obviously, that's a trend in our movement, right? And you see a lot of people who own firearms, for whom that's the gateway issue, right? And because it's so fundamental to like freedom and use of force, and it demonstrates, you know, in examining the issue, the ridiculousness of government control, from which you can come to a lot of really acute conclusions. But I would say even more fundamentally than owning guns is taking responsibility for your own protection, right? Whatever form is legal, safe, and appropriate for you. But still, I'm kind of surprised.
I think I feel kind of stupid.
Yeah, just.
Well, maybe it's the nature of this crowd. How many of you are parents? Homeschooling, there you go. Excellent. Well, unschooling, homeschooling, whatever it is, or even just get private schools that don't fit the mainstream educational paradigm, and not trusting the government with your child's mind. There's two other big ones for parents.
No vaccines?
Yes, no vaccines. And I wouldn't even say no vaccines because I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I'm not going to pass questions. But just not saying, well, the doctor or the government said put all these needles in my kid, so I'm just going to do it without a question.
At least a question.
Exactly. And at least make a decision for yourself, you know, and for your child in a way that is based on your knowledge and your research rather than authority, because your relationship with authority exchange. There's one other big one that's a lot of fun, because peaceful parenting, actually, yes, that's all I was thinking, but that's a very important one that goes along with it. I should sit there for in this area. Because there's one other big one that's way more fun to talk about. There's my fiance Macy's here, we got engaged a couple weeks ago. See, if you're ever having any trouble public speaking, you need an easy applause line. Hey, I just got engaged. I can't wait until we get to announce that we get married. People go, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. You are supposed to get married? No. But we already have the government in the bedroom. No, Macy and I, what's that?
So I hope they're enjoying it.
Macy and I have been talking about having kids, and so we got to watch this video of a woman giving birth in a creek. She just rolled out a yoga mat and was like, it was really cool. And so, home birth, right? You know, and that's like, and to a lot of people, that's a big scary one. Now, unfortunately, I don't think I have to worry about it myself, but for women who are like, oh, we're supposed to have our children in a hospital, why? And then you go like, just even with all the legitimate concerns and risks and understanding that, you look at the statistics of healthy children and where they're born, and it's like, well, gee, maybe going to a hospital full of sick people to have a child is a bad idea.
Left the women in a nursery to cry.
Right.
We made it a million years or so without the hospital. There's a way.
Okay, so back to drugs, because that's a really fun topic, right? Marijuana specifically, and maybe you guys are in a room with people that want to admit, libertarians smoke more pot than the average American, right? You guys are really like, well, we can't really admit that around here.
I live in D.C., I can.
Yeah, okay. And that's why you live in D.C.
That's the only part of it.
Why would you ever want libertarians, even if they don't smoke pot?
Oh, yeah.
They're corporate.
The attitude is totally, and thank you for mentioning that, because we haven't had anybody point that out yet before. And that is an important distinction that really is much broader in the movement. Regardless of your personal drug choices, there's a kind of acceptance. And the one thing that's really forgotten in the debate about drugs in general is that they affect everyone differently. You know, and libertarians seem to have an inherent respect for that. You know, and just being able to look at it rationally. And the conversation about marijuana has really shifted. And let's just take a moment to appreciate where we are historically right now. This is the end of the beginning of the end of the war on drugs. What a beautiful thing to celebrate. Say, yeah, thank you to the government. It's like watching a piece fall off a glacier. You know, it's like a giant chunk of ice just just like, and then there's this crack, this loud noise, and it starts to slide away, and you go like, that's not staying on much longer, is it? It's about to just dissipate into the ocean of freedom now. And for those of you who have studied the issue and understand just the pervasiveness of the war on drugs record.
Well, that period because of how much blood has been shed over it. I mean, well, population will go up by hundreds of thousands.
Just look at the prison industrial complex, pharmaceuticals. I mean, we know the history with the paper industry, but now we have law enforcement, the judicial system, all of the other interests that benefit from marijuana being illegal. But we know why it's really illegal. It's a gateway drug. No, it's a gateway to freedom. Because you can't smoke pot and not realize that the government's totally full of shit. And it is a gateway, like not in and of itself. It's a gateway because like of all the things that are wonderful the government has made illegal, it's the mildest and the most accessible and the most popular. And it really does change the perspective when you go, why is this illegal? And the conversation has shifted in a really beautiful way from what I think what it used to be. You guys remember when California was debating medical marijuana? That was like such a big deal a couple decades ago, and it was like, oh yeah, it's for my glaucoma, dude. Am I dating myself with that joke? But back then it was like, you were Snoop Dogg, right. Glaucoma actually, it's not for the pain or discomfort. Glaucoma creates like a fluid pressure on the cornea. And they didn't know how it worked, but smoking pot reduced the pressure. Can you imagine how painful that is? And to have that cure, to be able to see, to have your eyeballs work versus not working. But the thing about weed is like you turn around every day and there's something else that it cures. It really is a wonder drug. Maybe that's why it's illegal. But now, we know undeniably, scientific proof, all the evidence out there, that for seizure kids, and like I didn't know really that there were so many of them until we started hearing the stories, but there are kids who are born into living hell, where they have seizures all day long. You give them CBD, and it stops it. And there are still, in this country, thousands of state legislators who are actively working to keep that illegal.
They're scared of losing their jobs, like so much of the pharmaceutical industry will crumble.
If there is a hell, there is a special place for the people who work to keep medicine away from seizure kids. I don't see how you just, it's there, it's undeniable, it is inhumane, it is freaking sick. That anybody can stand up and say, no, we can't allow a version of this that doesn't get you high to be distributed medically. And it saves kids' lives. I mean, some of the anti-cancer properties are insane. But like, hey, if you smoke cigarettes, and this is crazy. People usually, like, when they do their research, people don't believe this when I first hear it. But they've done longitudinal studies now of people who just smoke cigarettes versus people who smoke pot and cigarettes. And guess what? If you smoke pot and cigarettes versus just cigarettes, you have a lower risk of lung cancer. How about that? They're going to be lacing cigarettes with pot for health reasons. Like Marlboro, they're like, this is our healthy cigarette, kids. There you go. But if marijuana is illegal for all these reasons, what's the stuff that they make really, really illegal? These are
The big bad drugs.
psychedelics. Thank you. There are a couple more in there. All the other hard drugs. And I'm not talking about like beat is soft because it's squishy, and like meth is a crystal, so it's hard. But MDMA is one that's dear to my heart because of its medical properties and romantic. You're allowed because of its romantic properties as well, right? MDMA, Molly, was originally developed as a therapy drug for couples in the 80s. And it was very successful. And at some point they said, oh, people are having fun with this. We have to make it illegal. Okay, that's actually not true. They want you to think that that's how it works, right? They want you to think, well, hey, whatever, it was getting out of control, people were abusing it. That's not it. What they found out was that, and now we have specific research to show this, for guys with PTSD, and by the way, I ran a peer support group for guys with PTSD when I lived in D.C., called Home Front Battle Buddies. When I went to the VA, they gave me, when I told them I was having trouble sleeping, 5 prescriptions, 3 of which had suicide listed as a side effect, including Prozac. PTSD, the guys that I was dealing with, you could tell the ones who crawled their bombs would destroy their lives, and the guys who smoked pot were at least able to control their symptoms enough to engage in the kind of talk therapy that is really the only cure for PTSD, other than a lobotomy. And MDMA, 2 sessions, 2 doses with a trained therapist for people who have clinical symptoms of PTSD, cures it in almost every case.
And that's solo as opposed to as a group?
So yeah, in individual therapy sessions. And 2 hits of MDMA right now on the street, or on the Silk Road, whatever version of that is out there, I wouldn't know. $10, $20 a hit. Which means that if it was being manufactured legally, it would cost more to package and deliver those 2 hits than to make them. I mean, the cost would be pennies. Compare that to a lifetime of therapy and Prozac. Makes it really simple to see why something like that has to stay illegal, right?
Dependency.
Pharmaceutical industry would rather make patients than make cures, right? But somebody mentioned psychedelics, so we have to talk about that, right? There's something really powerful that you get. If you haven't seen on my YouTube channel, I have a bunch of videos of my first 6 times smoking DMT. And you go, how the hell did that happen, right? Well, someone's like, hey man, you got your video camera, right? You want to come smoke some DMT and put it on your YouTube channel? I was like, now? Well, can you give me some time to think of why that would be a bad idea? No? Alright, well, let's do it. So, those are all out there now. And there's something, DMT, mushrooms, and acid in particular, do something to your mind that nothing else does. Now, we've been, this is an interactive event, so while we're on the topic of LSD, I'd like you all to reach under your chairs. You get a tab, you get a tab, you get a tab. Just kidding, we didn't get here early enough. We got it over here, but we'll pass it on. One of the things, page 98 in the lower left corner, just carry that on.
There's probably a recording device on that.
Oh yeah, of course there is.
So, let's stop.
So my advice about all substances is to make safe, informed decisions. Very informed decisions. So, one of the things that we didn't talk about in terms of health is exercise. And it's maybe not as obvious a trend in the freedom movement, but libertarians tend in believing about health and fitness goes along with that. One of the things we didn't get as an answer was yoga. Anybody here into yoga? Kind of tough and male-dominated movement. But hey, for the guys, if you ever have like any apprehension about doing yoga because you're afraid that you're going to be judged for it by other dudes in the movement, 2 words for you, all that goes away. Yoga pants. They are so comfortable. I'm looking at the other one. If you haven't done yoga, you owe it to yourself to try it 2 or 3 times. I'm saying because there's a whole range of experiences that you get from, a really calm, meditative session where you don't even break a sweat, you just do a lot of stretching and, connecting with your body. It's very therapeutic. To Bikram hot yoga session, which is 9 minutes, which will kick make your ass harder than a 9-minute military calisthenics workout. Like, no. I mean, I go to the gym and I live like I was in the Marines, and I bring a gallon of water with me, then I'll drink like a third of it. I'll do a 90-minute hot yoga session, and then I will drink an entire gallon of water in 90 minutes. I mean, it really is, and if you have to pass a drug test anytime soon, I'm sure you're not bad for that. But you really owe it to yourself to get that range of experiences and see what it does for you. And most people don't know that yoga was developed as a warm-up for meditation. And at the end of any good 90-minute session or an hour session, you have 5 to 15 minutes of a lying meditation where you just enjoy that experience of being connected with your body, maybe in a state of exhaustion, but being able to turn that attention inward and just enjoy that state of meditation. Yes?
This too, I mean, is a point out. I heard somebody say before, obviously some people's bodies are probably all jacked up, and some of those things that when you're doing yoga aren't possible. So I feel like yoga just represents being able to be in touch with your body, taking some time to actually, whatever. Like I play music, and sometimes the energy levels, like due to the intensity or whatever it is, to me feel like what has been explained about yoga. Like you get so much of your energy out in a different way. You kind of get to know yourself, and so there's more than just one way. I feel.
Absolutely.
But it's important to spend time with yourself. Take that time.
And it's important to point out about yoga what you said about, poses being challenging. Are you really going to be intimidated by yoga? But you can always do your own thing. You're always welcome to sit and watch. Like there's nothing wrong with going to a class that's too hard for yourself and just sort of sitting back and watching people. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But meditation is one of these other trends that sometimes we actually get as an answer when we're talking about health in particular. And for me, it was like I used to run barefoot. That was my, to me, that was a form of meditation. And for different people, it's different things, right? But you guys want to feel a little bit more free in about 10 seconds? A fun little exercise with me? All right. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath in and consider for just a moment that everything is right in the universe. And take a deep exhale and slowly open your eyes. Now, if you didn't understand what we just did there, you will by the time I'm done tonight, because the acid will have kicked in by then. There's a feeling that you get when you get in touch with just that idea. What goes along with that is an incredible sense of self-acceptance as well. If everything is right in the universe, everything is right in me. And there's something about that person being free in a way that someone who doesn't get that isn't. Now, when I was in Fallujah in 2004, I was the guy who always got up early to tell jokes and stories and sing songs and get the guys on my team in a good mood. And as traumatic as that experience was, I enjoyed the challenge. And you've seen people in every field of human endeavors in that Zen state of engagement, right? Where they're engaged in a challenge, in an endeavor, in something that calls upon all their abilities and all their talents and really fires up their passion in a way that, being in that state of ultimate happiness. Right? It's not, the more you're accomplishing, or the happier the more satisfied you are, the more material wealth you have. But the real height of human existence is that kind of Zen engagement in a higher purpose and a higher calling, right? And in the Marines, maybe it's the sort of whistle past the graveyard mentality, but ain't raining, eating, training, that kind of stuff. The machismo. But there is an important psychological underpinning to that. And I found myself in the same state when I was in solitary confinement in D.C. a few years later, when I was there for the shotgun video. And it was something we don't remind ourselves of enough about the beauty of the human experience. That you have the ability to choose your demeanor at all times. We're going to have our emotional reactions and responses, but what we do with that is always our choice. Every bad day is self-imposed. And maybe this is why I like to call it my government-induced taxpayer-funded spiritual retreat. A beautifully manicured gated community with 24-hour security, full food services, guy who can record podcasts over the jail phone, the guards with all of our name tags, kind of listen to you, at least by follow the rules around you. So every chance I got, the guards are coming by, for food or for mail or to flash people with the lights in the middle of the night, whatever it was, I would say, excuse me, officer, can I talk to you for a minute? I need to tell you something. Come over to the little windows in my cell door, and I would say, you're a free, beautiful, independent human being. You should never let anyone tell you otherwise. Have a nice day. Now, those people are laughing at that because you know what the guys are thinking in that moment. Oh, a fun question to ask in these events, too. How many of you have been to jail? Overnight count? Really? See, getting arrested doesn't happen that often.
No, normally you're released on a summons.
Okay. All right, services. They like getting tickets here.
Yeah.
So, what were those guards thinking? How is this coming out inside the gate? How can they know on the outside? I can tell you, maybe it's because you dress up in a silly costume every day. You work a terrible 9 to 5 as a cog in the machine. Your boss doesn't give a damn about you. Whereas the people that I'm working for, like who wrote me mail when I was in jail, have a lot more work to give, and sure, I'm here for a righteous purpose. But there's something even more fundamental to this for us as activists. Now, when we first start paying attention to what's going on, when you go from a state of not paying attention, it has to bring you down in some way, right? Nobody goes, gee, the world's worst screwed up that I ever read, impossible, yay! So in the course of waking up, how many of you have felt angry? Wake up, yeah. I mean, you have any sense of justice, right? You have to be angry. Sometimes we get a round of applause when I say that. Yeah! Let's hear it for the angry people. They lied to me, damn it. Yeah. How about when you realize you're more than 50 times likely to be killed by a cop or by a terrorist, and as much as your neighbor might be a threat to stealing something from you, the IRS is kind of a guarantee that something will be stolen from you? How many of you felt some form of fear in the course of waking up? Too afraid to raise your hands. Okay, so but there's a fear, right? Like maybe you're afraid of the right things for the first time. Or how about when you start looking at the history of statism, the cost of war, and the destructiveness economically, all the opportunities and lives lost, and just the cost of statism over the millennia. How many of you have felt some sort of sadness or depression, right, as a result of that? And you have to, right? If this is motivated by love of serving a higher vision of what the world can be. God, freaking sad. But then what do we do with all of this as activists? We grab our signs and our bullhorns and we go out on the street corner and we say, "Now join me in my fear, my anger, my depression." Some of you are going, "Oh shit, I've been that guy, huh?"
It's okay.
But what's the response when you go out with that attitude? Screw you! I'm going home to watch the dance with the stars and get happy little wake slave. Why would I want to be a part of that? Why would I want to? Look, your truth brings you down. What business do you even have sharing that with other people, right? So, if we're going to share the other thing about that kind of activism is that we get fooled. It really is a movement. We've been sucked into thinking of this as a political movement. And politics is a conversation of who we point the guns at government, organized society. Our premise from the beginning is no, that's not a legitimate way to do things. That's not moral. This is a political movement. It's an anti-political movement. You're saying politics good. We got a cure for that. This is a philosophy movement, a morals movement, an ethics movement, a cultural movement, a lifestyle movement. It's a grassroots movement, right? It's not about the top-down solutions even. So, there's this temptation, and it's really cool to see, like, even we can fill a room like this here, because 5 years ago, you might not be able to do this. And when most of you woke up, at some point, even today, if you're waking up today, there's a point of am I the only one? There's some self-consciousness, right? There's a lot of that, of being at least different from the mainstream. And so the real danger of this, thinking of it as a political movement, is we get sucked into, I'm going to put on a suit and tie, I'm going to comb my hair, and I'm going to go out and tell people I'm going to be a little wage slave, and I work my 9 to 5, and I pay my taxes. And they go, you sound like all the other assholes are totally full of shit. And the people who want to hear this now don't want to hear it from someone who's coming out with all the negativity of politics and the reaction of fear and anger and depression. They want someone who can say, this has made my life better. And the other way that this changes your activism is in your attitude towards authority. If you really are emotionally free, and you can be happy at any time, do you see how that in a deep level changes that relationship to authority? Now, if you don't know how to be happy, what's the point of being free, right? But on a more fundamental level, by the way, chapter 9, section 4, this is the part that I wrote when I was in jail. Happiness causes freedom. We've been tricked into thinking, even from the greatest of libertarian authors of all time, Thomas Jefferson, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as if happiness is something you chase down and be over the head with a club and drag home your hay to enjoy forever and ever, as opposed to a choice that you make in every moment. And when you really get that choice, that means that you can have a boot heel literally on your back and a smile on your face. And you can look up at that guy and there's no anger anymore. There's no hatred. There's no contempt. If anything, maybe pity, empathy. I mean, you don't really think that the cops who beat up protesters are well-adjusted human beings who go home to happy, loving households every night, do you?
Sure they do.
Or the politicians who seek power to satisfy themselves, you think winning the next election really makes them happy? Or in a sick mail,
Everyone else's status, dude. Like, no one else is woken up. So again, they're more than happy. Like, they thrive when
No. Those people are slaves to seeking power as an external means of satisfying something that's missing that prevents them from choosing happiness in a truer way.
So your theory is just everyone's happy.
No, but then what
I've
happens?
never seen John McCain really happy.
Happy people who have that self-control and that emotional freedom might be fooled into endorsing the status paradigm and voting for it, but they are not authoritarian people. Someone who has that doesn't actively psychologically seek to control others, doesn't seek to get elected to office in order to control others, doesn't seek ego gratification from the glory of being an elected official. Right? And the same thing is true about money. You think the banksters, and you all know how central the banking racket is to the government racket, or maybe you start it the other way around, right? George Carlin said, trying to make yourself happy is like trying to satisfy your hunger by duct taping sandwiches to your body. These are not happy people. These are the ones who need this more than anybody else, eventually.
Happy is not a personal, a while ago I decided something that can't be obtained. It's not like the pursuit of happiness. I feel it's almost like a ploy. Like you're never going to be able to build from the ground up. You just can't be happy here and now. Like when the boots on your neck and you're laying on the ground and there's nothing else you can do, you have to appreciate the fact that you're here in this experience no matter how shitty it is.
Yes. And I don't care if you've got 40 acres and your homestead, a house you built yourself, and completely independent food system that sustains you and your family, and off-grid power and water. If you stare at your computer screen being angry all day, guess what? You're not free. They win, you lose, end of story. So how do we go forward from our understanding of this in our activism? How do we then take this as a way to more effectively share the message and win converts? We're going to be honest about this as a movement. We win converts to a different way of thinking. You all know what I mean by that. If you go to people with philosophy. That, by the way, could solve most of the world's problems. But more importantly for me, it's allowed me to live more free. It's empowered me to live better. It's made me happier. Would you like to hear about that?
The only way I've found to win a convert is to make them curious enough to ask questions.
Well, if you come out with this
You
attitude,
can't feed it to them. They're not going to eat it off your plate. They're not going to take it from you off the silver spoon. You have to make them curious and go, gee, why is this going to happen? Give them a piece, so go find the answers to the rest of them.
so if you get stuck into this as a political game, right, you're going to start arguing with people and debating. You want to be like Sisyphus? You want to keep rolling the rock up the hill over and over again? Win debates, win arguments, win votes, win signatures, win Facebook flame wars and YouTube comment battles. You guys all know the guy who was converted by losing a Facebook flame war, right? So if you go with something like, hey, would you like to be more free and more happy like right now? You're never going to get, oh gee, I don't know about that. Being free and happy? Who's going to build the roads?
People have built them before.
You just don't get that question anymore. You guys know who the first person to win every argument is, right? The first person to start arguing. You think the people who invented, say, oral hygiene had to argue with people? They just had to smile. They say, hey, do you want to keep your teeth? It was kind of obvious, right? And so sharing the message this way radically changes how we engage with others and how we share with them. So we're going to take a break now for a commercial for freedom. I wrote this book when I was in jail. I started writing it when I was in jail because it hadn't been written yet. And this speaks to the nature of how people wake up, right? You're right, they have to ask the questions for themselves at some level. It doesn't come from a conversation. No one changes their mind by talking to someone like just in maybe over years or over months or whatever, but never just like, challenge me. What your worldview is different from mine? Okay, that sounds good. I'm going to embrace that. Yeah, what's the difference between a statist and a libertarian? About 6 months, right? Well, no, now it's like a week of watching YouTube videos and reading Wikipedia articles. And it's accelerating. But the point is that it happens in quiet contemplation. It happens when someone accepts a new worldview for themselves. You know, like they used to say that the flat earth was the center of the universe. And then someone said, well, maybe the round earth isn't the center of the universe. And they exiled him and they killed people for saying that. But this was the standard model. Like, hey, government is good and righteous and necessary. And you can see, they can explain how the sun and the moon move around the earth and, kind of makes sense with the math. And then the planets and other orbits and all, they're going to make all these fancy equations to explain all this, and equations upon equations. And then someone said, well, wait a second, maybe the sun is the center of the solar system, and everything fell into place, right? And it's like, well, the excuses are always like, well, if we just elect the right people next time, or, well, politicians, they really, really love us. They make mistakes sometimes, And then wait a second, no, maybe we all vote ourselves. Maybe people should be free. Maybe we shouldn't try to control it by force. And life gets a lot simpler. But for most people, the men in fancy hats said that the earth was flat. I guess the earth is flat. I'm going to go back to tilling the soil. The men with fancy hats say that the world is round. Well, I guess the world is round now, right?
Do you know where the flat earth thing came from?
The church?
Well, church government / the monarchy of Europe knew that the New World was here. They knew that there was very rich land to be.
Well, they didn't want they wanted to monopolize
All off the edge.
They didn't have tax collectors here to collect taxes, so we can't build a fence all the way across Europe. Let's build one in your mind.
You're going to fall off the edge.
Go far off in
You're going to smoke pot, you're going to go crazy. You're going to get in order for people to embrace this, they have to see the whole picture, right? They have to develop that for themselves. And a lot of people have told me that Adam versus the man woke them up. I'm very honored by that. But a lot of people have come to me, how many of you know the Jefferson Dance Party video from 2011? My hits always surprise me. Like, I didn't think that was going to do very well as a video. My producer, he's like, here's the 11-minute version. It's 5.5 minutes from one camera angle, and then 5.5 minutes from the other camera angle. I'm like, you mean people are going to watch this, and after watching it, go, let me see that again. Yeah! I told you.
Body slam.
Yeah, you have it, it's like a train wreck, right? It's like a car accident, like you have to just... I told them to make a 1-minute version, and it didn't do very well. But people still come to me to this day and say, Adam, that woke me up. They're all lying. Nobody was like, oh my gosh, did you see that guy get body slammed? That was bad. There's a bit of a leap, right? There has to be a certain amount of comfort embracing this as a comprehensive worldview. So while I was in jail, I was able to do a survey of the literature, of our movement, even going back to Socrates and Plato, to Locke, to Smith, to Bastiat, to Spooner, to Hayek, to Mises, to Rand, to Rothbard, to Comte, to Dr. Paul Sr., to Molyneux, to Woods, and everybody who's tried to convey this message in a way that people can get it on their own in that kind of quiet contemplation. For me, it was my final point of conversion, if you will, was reading Ethics of Liberty by Murray Rothbard. And it was... I didn't actually read the book. I listened to it. And I know, you gotta twist people's arms to get them to read a book these days, but it's okay, it's 2015, you can listen to the audiobook and tell people that you read it. So, speaking of which, this is free in every single digital format possible, including as an audiobook, as a single file, as chapters, there's no excuse. So, I've been issuing people a challenge on the tour, and the challenge is read the book. Don't worry, that's not the challenge. At least it should be, right? And then decide for yourself that this is not the easiest way to share the message with someone else and wake someone else up. And if it's not, then find what it is for yourself and do that. Because I guarantee that is the activism that you will find the most satisfying. But I'm going to put you on the spot right now. How many of you can honestly say everyone in your immediate family who you're in regular contact with at least knows why you care about freedom? Oh, that's pretty good, actually. Normally, it's a lot of time. Don't talk to me. He's glitter bag. Does everything here related to that? Yeah, you're one thing over there. So, one of the things that, we always forget to mention that, like, the greatest plug for this book, the greatest endorsement, we got from the Department of Justice. It's banned in all U.S. prisons now. So, they will correct the good order, security, and discipline of the institutions. If by that they mean the institution of government, just change the government to like prison and roll it in. Actually, you know what book is allowed in jail? I actually have to read a couple bits of it. We can put Mein Kampf on it.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
But now that we have this, okay, and I don't know, there are a lot of things that libertarians go, if we just got everybody to do this, the government would be over in like a week, right? This is biggest Bible now! There is one thing though, and there's one other book that I plug on par with my own, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. And especially if we're trying to share something as meaningful as this, it's actually very important. Are there any students or fans of nonviolent communication who have heard of it, understand it? Only one here? Wow! Because from LA? Okay. Well, they're not really good with nonviolent communication in DC. Now, the thing with nonviolent communication is, a lot maximize the value of your communications with other people, right? Well, one of the most important things is you get rid of all of the emotional manipulation, you get rid of all of the subversion, you get rid of all of the, the deception of, being afraid to share your feelings and needs, and you learn to listen empathically and get in tune with other people's feelings and needs. And it's very important in all of your relationships. It really is life-changing. Highly recommend it. But back to this. So if you have people in your life who, immediate family or regular contact with, and you can go to them and say, mom, dad, brother, sister, I can go on. I love you, you love me, I care about you, I've gotten to know you, and I really appreciate that, and this is something that I care about that's very important to me, and, I'm not asking you to change your worldview or anything like that, but this is something that cares about me. Would you mind taking, 15 minutes to at least get into why this is something I care about? The first 9 pages of this book sums up. Could you read 9 pages? Oh, would you rather listen to the audiobook? We can listen to it on the way to school. I'll sit and listen to the first 15 minutes of you. But as someone who cares about me, I would appreciate if you took the time to at least consider it and understand this about me and why I care about it. And if they say, no, I can't do that. 15 minutes? No, I don't care about you that much. You probably need to reconsider those relationships.
Here's the problem. There's a fundamental problem that I've run into a lot. It's called mass ignorance. Okay? And I'll give you a really good example. Every once in a while on staff I watch Jimmy Kimmel. And he had his man on the street interviews. And they were asking people, gee, did you watch the landing on Pluto? Did you see our guys from NASA landing on Pluto? And out of 10 people they talked to, only one of them realized that this was some sort of fantasy. The rest of them just, oh yeah, I saw that. It was over there. Our guys from NASA for landing on Pluto. Come on, man. Now we know how Nancy Pelosi gets reelected. These people are on drugs.
I don't feel like that's as much.
All right. And I run into those people all the time here, too. I mean, that's like, what's going on in the world?
That is one important obstacle. But we're going to talk before we wrap up. We come back before I get into that about where this is going and why in the long run, at least, I'm not worried about. But in how this changes what you can do in sharing the message, there's something else about the propaganda of government that reinforces that, right? And we all know how government propaganda, it has an intent, it wants you to be afraid, right? That's the obvious one, is the fear of it. They want you to be afraid of people outside the borders, they want you to be afraid of terrorists, they want you to be afraid of your neighbors and cops and people, government.
You don't fear them, but look at you, what do you like? Wait a minute, these people could be free of us.
But what we don't talk about enough, we're very comfortable talking about, the negative side of that. But what we don't talk about enough is the flip side of that, of what it means to be impervious to that kind of manipulation. And the person who gets that feeling that everything is right in the universe, that person who has that kind of emotional freedom, guess what? They can no longer be controlled or manipulated by fear in any way. And that's why acid is really illegal. That's why they can't let people get this deeper awareness and understanding. This is why they can't let people have emotional freedom. You think of all the ways they control us. When we talk about the coercive nature of government, the actual coercion. You guys know this, right? We only have to arrest one person for not paying their taxes, and everybody else falls in the line. How do they really control all of those people, all of us, with all of the consent of society? With words. Words!
And violence.
Like that's it. No, it's so much more psychological than physical. Now, in order for government to exist, they need two kinds of enforcers, right? Cops and soldiers. Without people willing to do violence against peaceful people, the state is no longer a state, by definition. It ceases to be government when it ceases to have that origin. And what we are at now is an incredible power of all the technology available to us. But look at war as the example of this. Well, first, I got to point out, and this is another such a beautiful thing to step back and celebrate and appreciate. We are living in the most peaceful times in human history. And this is a trend. This isn't a blip. You are less likely today than ever before to be subject to violence at the hands of another human being. What a beautiful thing to celebrate in the course of humanity moving towards a free society. And the reason is, in the way that we are connected today, you cannot have the disconnect between enforcers and their victims that is required for them to carry out the policies of the state. And I'll say this now.
To make it work, it's like the government seems like, like things like false flag events are happening more and more often now, and it's more exposed because they're like, it's not working as well as it used to. With the technology, they have to observe it.
Chapter 3 of section on war, function, and power to explain why government always will get away with as much war, or will always conduct as much war as it can get away with, right? It's always in the best interest of the state. And they can't get away with what they used to be able to. And you simply can't. I mean, I have a device in my pocket that has a computing power that used to take a building to house that is now connected to everyone else on the planet with one of these. You simply cannot get millions of gullible men dressed up in silly costumes and have them meet in the middle of a field where none of them live and kill each other because they're wearing different colors. Inconceivable. Yes, I know what that word means. Thank you. Look at the war. Like I was very active in the anti-Iraq movement when I got out of the Marines. If you couldn't tell from the stupid look on my face, yes, I was in the United States Marine Corps. I'm better now, thank you. And when we were, we didn't change the policy with Iraq at all. And we found out that the anti-war movement was really more of an anti-Bush movement as soon as Obama got any traction, and the anti-war left disappeared. Or at least it said, oh, free health care? All right, it's cool if you kill a few brown people on the other side of the planet. I mean, really? Sick. That's what it came down to. And even with Obama, trying to get troops stationed in Iraq, Armageddon was negotiated under Bush. What happened when he tried to get boots on the ground in Syria? People won't admit their mistakes nearly as much while they're making them as afterward, and not being willing to repeat that. And it was military soldiers and other members of the military and wives with silly placards on social media saying, I didn't enlist to fight for Al-Qaeda in Syria. So there's that problem on that. Instead, just send all the money to the CIA and State Department, which did a story the other day, of course.
That's when we all need to hit a drugs problem.
How long have they been trying to get a war going in Iran?
The last 70 years.
70s.
But actually, in this modern age, around the nuclear issue, it's been a decade and a half or so, right? Hey, we got to go. And they can't do it. They cannot fabricate a cause. It's bad. And I say this is about the global war on terror, knowing the scope and the destruction of this. I torture people in delusions. And I know the depth of what it can lead people to do. But what they can't get away with anymore is this large-scale, hey, we're just going to get a force-on-force war. It's never going to happen again in human history. It's not. I say this like all these things with a few caveats, like, okay, unless we all, like voluntary society is inevitable, unless an asteroid hits the Earth and wipes us all out first. I shouldn't have to say that, right? Unless we all, someone goes crazy and blows everybody up on the news. Okay, barring those things. What we actually see is that moving towards a free society is a natural course of human progress, of life seeking harmony, even at a more fundamental level. Now, this is something we only started doing recently, but it's really fun. How many of you can say that, well, I got to back up first. I mentioned Sam Conkin earlier. Are there any fans of Sam Conkin? Anybody read Conkin? No? Got the Roth shirt doesn't read Conkin?
Now that you mention it, I'm going to do that so it'll...
Well, he had a little debate actually going with Rothbard. sometimes we describe it as a fancy way of saying tax evasion. Excuse me?
Gray market.
Gray market, yeah, and his theory was that the gray market would expand, black market would expand to displace the red violent market of government, or government-sanctioned, violent-sanctioned economic activity. But he had two definitions of libertarian he liked to put out. One, anybody who calls himself a libertarian. You guys see a problem with that? Because then you get Bill Maher and Glenn Beck and Bill Maher calling themselves a libertarian. Hey, fans, Bill Maher here, new rules. All right, new rule, Bill. You can't donate $1 million to the Obama campaign and tell me it's because you care about freedom.
That's right.
Tompkins' second definition. Anyone who agrees with me on absolutely everything. You all know that guy, right? So I'd like to suggest a more practical definition. And I think of the freedom movement not just as the broader human trend of progress, but obviously there's a core, there's an actual social movement, in a sense, if you will, of people who are consciously, deliberately moving forward in this direction. So the definition that I propose, that I think is more important for this, is people who can articulate freedom as a principle and at least attempt to apply it consistently. So, how many of us would you say there are in America? 1% of the population would be 3.2 million. Fun question, isn't it?
Yeah. It's like a third of a percent.
Third of a percent, actually, that's very good. That's about the consensus that we have up to, about 1 million. So a little less than a third of a percent. And, that includes people who, might be already living in the woods that you'll never meet, that will never engage. That might include anarcho-socialists, or constitutionalists, or principled minarchists, or, people who don't agree with you on everything. And you guys, you can't be right about everything all the time. We're all going to come to different conclusions as a result of this understanding. Being right about everything all the time is my job. You don't have to worry about that anymore. So, 1 million of us, third of a percent. How many of you can say that you came to this complete understanding? I would say the bottom of the rabbit hole, but the only time you're ever wrong is when you say you got to the bottom of the rabbit hole, because there is no bottom. But this particular complete understanding of either voluntarism or freedom in whatever form it means to you, how many of you can say that you've embraced this, you've come to that final understanding in the last 5 years? Come on, raise them up high. Last 5 years.
Could that be longer?
Yeah, well, how many of you, okay, now put your hands down, how many of you can say it was before 2010 that you woke up? Not you.
Why?
I know you're for it. Before 2010. All right. Before 2010. So you really woke up before 2010.
It started for me.
Coming to that realization, about 2/3 versus 1/3 there. What does that tell you? Now,
It's happening.
this is what to turn this numerically into something much more conservative, let's say about half of us. This is my estimate. About half of us got here in 5 years or less. And I talked to some guys at the John Birch Society who've gone back decades, and we've actually traced the growth of this curve from when in the 70s it was maybe 50, 100,000 to the million it is today. It's not going up and down. It's a nice smooth curve. Now, it's not an exponential curve, right? It doesn't just keep going. It's an S-curve of adoption, because you have the limit of 100% of the population. But we're still at this point where growth is accelerating. Now, if there's 1 million of us, you think we can, on average, just wake up one other person in the next 5 years? Pretty conservative estimate, right? And that just maintaining this growth rate. You see where this is going. It's only a matter of decades. And the most conservative, if, like I said about this book, I don't know if this is a silver bullet. I don't know if this is like, hey, we get this out, this is, because everybody has that fantasy, right? But I know that it's going to be important in expanding past our current demographics. And that there are some people from this is going to be the gateway. And I know this because we've had this experience. We've had people, with the book already just being out for a little over a year. We get emails all the time saying, this was it. This changed my perspective. This woke me up. And I think there's a smaller core of us who are going to be really active. But maybe just the 1/10, and maybe that's the people in this room. The 100,000 in America of people who are really actively engaged with this. Do you really think we're only going to wake up an average of one person over the next 5 years? How many of you can commit to a very easy task that would barely interfere with your life at all, no matter what you're going to say? I'm going to wake up one person a month from now on. I'm going to make that commitment. That's it. I'm going to get one person to read the book. Maybe they're not going to wake up. Maybe they're going to need years. Maybe they're going to be really freaking slow like Adam. I need 10 years to really get there. I'm not joking. I started in high school. They said, hey, you're going to have to vote soon. Do you want to be a Republican or Democrat? So, really? I don't have a choice? I have to be totally freaking lame? And they were like, well, and it was like going to a used car dealership, and they take me to the back corner of the lot. The cars are like, they don't want anybody to see it. Well, you might be able to drive this thing home. We're not really sure what happened in the back seat. But, it's called the Libertarian Party, and they'd like to let them know. And I was like, yeah, sign me up for that. And it took me 10 years to understand what freedom really meant as a result. But, obviously people are getting this a lot faster now. So, we can really easily see that this process is inevitable. That this is something that is just a natural part of human progress. And if just a tenth of us, I hate to do like fantasy math, but you see if a core of us, if even just a small core of us commit to say, we're going to wake up one person every month. And it's not, you can't hand this book out on the street corner. Don't let it threat. Doesn't work that way. Sharing this message doesn't work that way. You have to follow up with people. You have to share this message meaningfully. You have to make that connection with someone and make them understand, or invite them to understand why it's important to you and how it can make their life better. And we know that there's no more guilt anymore, right? If there's no fear, there's no shame. There's no responsibility, there's no duty, there's no obligation, except maybe to yourself, to your own values. How many of you have gotten upset trying to guilt people into paying attention and overcoming their ignorance? How dare you like that picture of kittens and you didn't read the news story I posted on Facebook?
That's why you hear where the kitten died or something. I think you need to use the libertarian brutalism to break the cognitive dissonance. I think most people don't get it. And I can be as humanitarian as I want, but at what point am I just failing to even communicate that government force is a factor?
Well, the point of that is that you're going to need a different approach for everyone you talk to. But everyone is capable of getting this message, right? There's a fundamentally human message. And some of the things about this book that I'll brag about for a second here, in terms of its features and looking at all the other ways that people have tried to convey this message, it's not Eurocentric. There's no opinion, no judgment, no wishful thinking, no conjecture, no unnecessary labels. It's in line with the principles of nonviolent communication. It is universal to the human condition. Anybody on the planet can pick this book. Anybody who lives under a government will understand this. It's not the ignorance. Everybody has all the data they need to figure this out. What are they missing? The story, the framework, the logic, the reason, how they see this as a comprehensive worldview. Now, we only mentioned it briefly earlier about relationships. But I want to bring it back to this to conclude on looking at who we are as a movement. While we are just this 1/3%, who are privileged to have this historical perspective, this unique turning point in human history. And one of the things that we've seen in the movement is that romantic relationships are much better when you share this understanding with someone that you care about. And I'm so grateful to be traveling the country now with my fiance, and Macy is actually the real reason we're here, because she does all the driving to protect us from liability. So when you're able to connect with someone, it deepens your own appreciation, not just of your fellow human beings, but of yourself and of the message, and how it really has the power in an immediate sense to make your life better. So I know we just got to get it on a t-shirt eventually, right? Libertarians make better lovers. It's going to happen. I'm waiting for it. But I'm always tempted to quote the Apple commercial from the 90s. You guys know what I'm talking about? Think different. And it starts with, here's to the crazy ones. Well, screw that. It is only cliche. There's nothing good about being labeled sane in the sick society, right? Here's to the rebels, the outcasts, the misfits. Well, yeah, rebelling against injustice, rebelling against bullshit, rebelling against unjust authority. To the round pegs, or to the thing goes, to the square pegs and the round holes. Well, screw that. We're the really big round pegs that refuse to fit into the square holes that the matrix has laid out for us, right? But more importantly, is to who we are as a movement. What is our unique role in human history, in this unique turning point of the human experience, as we start to make the deliberate, conscientious turn towards a stateless, nonviolent, peaceful society, where the lovers, and the dreamers, and the visionaries. So on that note, thank you very much. Until people get really bored, we'll take questions.
I was going to say something too. I guess you pretty much already got to it in a roundabout way as well. When people are talking to other people, I think there's a few things to keep in mind. One is like, to me, when I, read what I have excerpts from the book and hear what you have to say, I don't necessarily categorize you as libertarian. In my opinion, it's a way to communicate with people. It's almost like a language to be able to talk to people. Maybe it's not like an ultimate answer, as much as it's a stepping stone towards like actual freedom. And another thing is too, but there's some reasons, I'm not religious, I'm not against being religious. I love everybody because they are cool. But sometimes people get scared away when they think that what you're trying to tell them is some sort of like tight belief system, that it's not this universal like communication language, it's right. So that's kind of a hard stepping stone. And the last thing is,
So when you are talking, would you like me to address my use of the word then?
you can. I was going to say, I was going to make one more point and you go to that. That was the first part. The second part is like when talking to people, people tend to get angry because people can seem to be ignorant, stupid, all these things, but people have to remember that, the same walk of life that calls us to be who we are today, it calls other people to be the way that they are, like compassion and understanding for their point of view is really, really important in getting through to people and not looking at them as super ignorant and like understanding and seeing that there's a reason that they are the way they are.
Yeah.
And that they're not idiots.
The people who are here today, all of us INTJs who crawled out of our parents' basements this afternoon, right? All of us who have, saw the Jefferson Dance Party video and had to resolve their cognitive dissonance. All of us philosophy and politics nerds, or all of us who at least were able to admit how we have been victims of the system. Like, we're already here. It's not the captains of the football teams and the cheerleading squads and the student body presidents who are the first to challenge and question the system, right? And that is not, when you're able to see it and appreciate us as a movement for all of those things, you lose that judgment of other people. And that sense of everything being right in the universe comes with an acceptance of others as well. If you don't have that, it's really impossible to share the message with them. But as to my use of the word libertarian, I use it here in the States. I use it among people. I use it in intellectual conversation. It's not in the book. The word libertarian is not appeared in the book once. And it's because it has all those connotations for a lot of people. But for me, it's simply someone who believes in freedom. And the term libertarian was originally coined to describe anarcho-capitalism very, very specifically. And it's since been, you could say perverted, you could say expanded, whatever. And I'm actually very passionate about bringing it back to its true definition because the version I got of it was a watered-down political version, maybe the David Koch LP part, as opposed to here's the philosophy. And I don't want you to go to war because I didn't get that. So I think, having that pure understanding of it, or that more specific moral understanding of it, is very important. But so I'm conscientious of how most people hear that word and think of it and how it's become, nebulous, like conservative or liberal. And I don't like even combined with those terms.
That's why the word anarchist, and that people don't realize the largest group of anarchists we have in this country are the Amish.
That's a good point. But I think back to Rothbard was the first to really codify this philosophy coherently in a sense. And what did he do for our PR effort? He took the most offensive two words to describe what we're talking about and put them together as anarcho-capitalism. You're just like, why? Why? And I get it intellectually, it makes sense, it's very precise, but, I like the book uses the term voluntarism to describe the foundation of the philosophy, but really it just comes down to believing in freedom. So I think, I hope in this room we can have that intellectual conversation. We can use the word libertarian without people going like, well, we're talking about these guys or these guys. And no, we're talking about ideas. Small, I'm a big supporter of the Libertarian Party here. I think it's a great gateway for a lot of people. I think a lot like it was for me. But it was actually cool when we were traveling through Texas, where the LP is very strong, to hear people go, no, Adam, it's okay, we're better now. We're over the dark Bob Bard days. I was like, oh, goodness. Everybody know Bob Bard was the nominee of the Libertarian. So it's the millennials of our movement are now at least as activists coming into positions of power and economic security and prominence within the Libertarian Party and really taking charge of it in a way that's bringing it back to that. And there's a lot more focus from, I went to the state convention in Florida when we were there, and it really is getting back to that core philosophy. And when I got back from Iraq, I bought the lifetime membership. Really the first time I could afford it. And the back of the card had the statement of principles. It was a very simple summary of the NAP. And then I went to D.C. 5 years later,